John 2:8. Kai lege autois, anklesate nun, kai ferite to arkatriklino, hoide eninkan. We continue to hear here about the wedding at Cana of Galilee, and we read, and he said to them. Notice how we're rendering that present tense verb in the past. It's a historical or narrative present. We've seen over and over again, especially verbs of speech and motion are found in the present tense in the midst of historical narrative. And he said to them, what did Jesus say? He said, draw now. That means to draw out. Like this is the same verb that's used in John 4 for the Samaritan woman about drawing water from the well. The verb is anteleo, to draw, but here it's obviously referring to drawing water out of the stone water jars. Draw now and carry or bear to the chief steward or to the master of the ceremonies. And then we read, and they carried, implied they carried the drawn out water to him. This you'll notice how in Greek, in narrative like this, you can have the article function basically like a personal pronoun, right? So we might have expected autoi, and they bore it out, or they carried it to him, but instead we can just use the article. This eninkan, I don't know if you recognize that. That's an irregular second aorist form of pharaoh, right? It's a second aorist active indicative third person plural. Someone is wondering, how in the world could I ever recognize that from pharaoh? And the only way is, quite frankly, by memorizing it. Just like in English, how do you know that went is the past tense of go? Only by memorizing it. So one other interesting question, I think, is why do we have an aorist imperative here and then a present imperative here? Why this distinction? Well, again, I think it has something to do with the verbal aspect, right? To draw out now is something you can imagine done, and there it is. It's just looking at the action as a whole. But why this verb of motion, carrying it to the chief steward in the present? Well, there's a pretty easy answer for that, is that verbs of motion have an extremely strong preference for the present tense imperative. So it's probably just influenced by stylistic reasons, common stylistic reasons in Koine Greek that wasn't even conscious in the mind of the author as they wrote this, to put the verb of motion as a present imperative, while this other verb is looking, again, probably a bit more maybe deliberate in terms of choice to convey the action, looking at it as a whole.